Okay, so our next presenter, Kristina Smith, is based in Istanbul, and I promised I wouldn't give a very long introduction, so I'm going to stop there. Kristina.
Thank you. Great. Hi, everybody. Does the sound okay? All right. Super. Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here and to get a chance to talk to you and to meet some of you in the breaks. Thanks so much. Yes, I am based in Istanbul, Turkey, although I don't sound Turkish. I don't know where you think I'm from, but I'm actually British. But I lived in America for a very long time and got connections kind of back and forth. People always want to know that, so I thought I'd tell you that right away. Most of my time these days is spent doing teacher training of one sort or another, either face-to-face or blended or online. I'm not working so much with language students anymore, although I kind of miss my days in the classroom. I hope I get a chance to go back in the class a little bit in the summertime. It would be nice to do that for a while. I'm interested in you guys as well. How many of you here are attending IATEFL for the first time? Wow, a lot of people. That's wonderful. Wow, I hope you really enjoy it. So that means you're also attending the SIG for the first time, since you're obviously attending the conference for the first time. Okay. How many people here are working as teacher trainers? Quite a lot of you. Great. Good. How many of you have been teacher trainers on an online course, e-moderators or something like that? Great. Quite a lot of people. Okay. How about having participated as a learner in an online course? Almost everybody. Oh my goodness. Okay. That's good to know before we start. I would like to know that. Okay, so I'll be looking a little bit about some of the design factors and some of the things we want to take into account when we are designing or setting up or maybe running online or blended courses today, okay? I'm not going to talk about research results or statistics. I don't have anything like that. I can really only share with you some of the experiences that I have had and some of the mistakes that I have made. I hope that you will learn from the mistakes that I have made and realize that there are some rocky places that you may or may not want to go. At least you'll know other people have tried that and had some difficulties, okay? The idea of online learning really comes out of distance learning, and distance learning has been around for quite a long time. Here I've got a couple of images and dates. With the person sitting next to you or around you, can you try to guess what the significance of those dates are? And the pictures are a clue. I'll give you 2 minutes. Okay, I'm kind of curious. Would anyone like to try the first one? 1728, 1840? No guesses? Is something related to the postage stamp? Yes, good guess there. Apparently the first attempt at distance learning was in 1728. An American man in Boston tried to do some kind of shorthand course. Well, it wasn't online, obviously, but I guess they were sending letters, I assume, sending out materials through the mail system at that time. And in 1840, Pitman, the Pitman shorthand system, he set up his correspondence courses, okay, and tried to teach shorthand and secretarial skills, distance learning. Okay, so distance learning and the idea that your teacher is not in the same room physically with learners has been around for quite a while. Okay, 1795. I like this one. This man deserves some kind of Nobel Prize posthumously, I think. It's the person who invented the pencil. Yes, I think that's a fantastic invention. I mean, a really truly disruptive technology. Can you imagine what the teacher thought? The first teacher who had to sit with a class of people who had pencils and paper. They could write things down. They could write down what the teacher was saying and share that outside class, just like the kids can with their YouTube videos today. And they could pass notes. They could write down whatever they wanted to. That is a truly disruptive technology, in my opinion, okay? And the man who did that is a Frenchman, I think. Might have been Swiss, I'm not sure. A man called Conte. Conte, the pencil brand that you use for artist pencils. He's the person who came up with the pencil, okay? So the idea of disruptive technologies has also been around for a very, very long time. Okay, we're not the first people to face this in our classrooms. And finally, 1934, TV, first used to deliver education in the University of Iowa. Okay. So we've had quite a lot of attempts at distance learning and, well, precursors of online learning for sure. This, by the way, is one of the things you might have been doing if you were a distance education provider more than 100 years ago. You might have been traveling around the countryside with your horse and wagon as a traveling school. Okay, they had them in Australia and also in the US in some parts. Okay, so the teacher travels to actually interact with the students. But things have changed a great deal now that we have the internet, right? Nowadays we have so many different opportunities to get online. We have so many different tools. We have so many different applications and programs. In fact, there's too many. Can you keep up with all of this? I can't. I get periodic sort of crises where I think, I can't learn about another app. Because every day there's something new. Every day there's another educational program or website that's going to revolutionize what we do in the classroom. You know, it's just overwhelming at times. I take a little break. I'm having a short break today and yesterday from all of that. Yeah, I think we can really get caught up in all of these different apps and tools and platforms and websites because they're all so exciting and interesting. We need to think a little bit about what we're going to be using these tools and apps for. What are the learning outcomes or our aims as teachers or as trainers working with people in a distance or online context? What kind of things do you use these tools and apps for? I recently used a live video conferencing site to have a meeting with some teachers, for example, who were in another country. And I've used wikis to be able to share course materials with people. Okay? What other tools and purposes do you have that you use, I wonder? Can you take a moment and talk to the person sitting next to you and see, okay? And brainstorm 2 or 3 from each person of the different tools that you're using and why you're using them if you're teaching online or working with students, please. So just 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, can I ask you to come back? I can imagine that there's been quite a lot of different tools suggested since so many of you have a lot of experience. Did you find anything new or something you haven't done by talking to one of your friends? A couple of new things? Okay. There is a huge amount out there. Some of the websites that I find particularly useful and helpful when I want to think about these kinds of tools are places where there are nice long lists. At the end of the PowerPoint, there are all of the references and websites, so you don't have to worry. But if you are online and you like to Google things while you're listening, if you look up the EdTech teacher, he's got a very nice list of about 17 different purposes for why you might want to use technology, and then for each purpose, he's got a whole range of different tools. So you may have used some of them, but maybe not the other ones. And there's more than 80 tools on the list. It's kind of an interesting and useful place to have a look if you need a different tool, you want to try something out that's different, okay, for your purpose. And for each one of these, this is a bit small, I apologize. He gives you the purpose and a whole list of different places, the things he likes about them, whether they're easy to use or not, okay? It's a useful site, yeah? We need to also think about the fact that students are not just tied to computers. This has been mentioned already once or twice today. But we also have all the mobile learning that's going on. Okay? We don't have to send the teacher out on a horse and carriage or whatever to take the school to learners. Learners just pick up their iPhones or their tablets and they get online and they can connect with almost anything that we want. And also things that we don't want, potentially. Okay? So there's just a huge amount of stuff out there. New things coming out all the time. It feels a bit to me like one of these pick and mix candy stores where you pick up a bag and you go in and you think, oh, the green one looks nice, I like that. Oh, I got something green, I know, licorice, I need licorice, so you pick some licorice. There's a huge amount of stuff out there, but how do we actually select what we need? And how do we know that we've got the right tools for the right purpose? And this is, I think, where everybody is a bit stuck these days, writing and thinking and trying to come up with different ways of looking at it. I like to go, even before we look at autonomy, okay, go right back to the beginning, what I think is really the beginning of everything, and think a little bit about who we are as teachers, or if you're a teacher trainer, as a teacher trainer, okay? Well, what are your beliefs about teaching and learning? You can see I like the avatar. It's always nice to have an avatar of yourself, isn't it? Okay, so yeah, that's one of the nice things about being online when they can't see you, right? When you think a little bit about your beliefs and your values as a teacher, I think we need to start with that. I'll show you why. Okay? That's my first tip. What are your beliefs and values of yourself as a teacher? Okay? One sort of dichotomy we might look at is whether you're more humanistic or more behaviorist. Okay? If you're behaviorist in your approach, you may think that students need a certain amount of knowledge. I mean, we have to give them some input. Yeah, we have to fill them up a little bit. Yeah, or you might be more on the humanistic end, and you might think, well, you know, the students are, they're an active part of the learning process. We want them to participate. We want to see them as whole people. They bring all their background experience to the classroom. I think most of us have a little bit of both, possibly in our teaching styles. I wonder what you think about this. Yeah, if you're working with a group of, for example, elementary students or teachers with very little background knowledge about teaching, where would you stand on this line? Can you talk to the person sitting next to you for a moment? Working with elementary students or teachers with less background? Thank you very much. I'm sorry to interrupt you in mid-flow. Okay? You may be thinking, why should we think about this? I mean, this has nothing to do with online learning, whether I'm more humanistic or more behaviorist. What's that got to do with designing an online program? But I think it has quite a lot to do with the concept of learner autonomy. And if that's what we're looking at developing through some kind of online course, I think it's important. If you have a more humanistic approach to teaching, you're going to see the students as agents in their own learning, probably. That's part of your tacit world knowledge, okay? Things you bring with you based on your experience. And if they're going to be agents, they have to participate in the whole autonomy thing, right? They're involved. Tassarini has a really nice model of learner autonomy. If you go online and look it up, you'll be able to click on the different links. I won't do that. It's been written directly for the learners to use, and Tassarini uses this when she's doing conferencing with groups of learners to help them think about how autonomous they already are. So at the top we have managing my own learning as the umbrella, and different aspects. Planning your learning, okay? Choosing the methods and materials, how these things help you to complete tasks, how you evaluate your work and monitor what you have done. And at the same time, you have to deal with yourself. You have to deal with your own feelings. You have to motivate yourself to be able to do all of this. Okay? Learner autonomy involves many, many different aspects. Knowing what it is you want to learn, or having an idea, being able to plan and set some goals. If you don't know what it is you want to learn, how do you know if you've learned it? Okay, so being able to set some kind of goals, being able to work towards those goals, and evaluate whether you've reached them, and think about what you might want to do next. That suggests a certain attitude to me, a certain kind of personality type as well, and a certain cultural background as well. I wonder if people all over the world are taught that this is a valuable way of being in a classroom. Because it doesn't really match what I see when I go around the world and visit lots and lots of different places. Some people are nodding, so you would agree with that. I think one of my first 10 tips, or second tip, after you've thought about yourself and to what extent you are on the humanistic side, and that you expect students to be able to take responsibility for their own learning, we need to actually go and look at who the learners are and where they come from and their backgrounds. And we need to do that quite carefully. So recently I was in some classes in another country And I watch teachers who teach English as a foreign language, but I also help teachers who are teaching science in English. So I was in a class watching a science teacher, and the teacher's method of teaching was that every day he gave 2 or 3 pages of homework to the students. The books are in English. The students go home and memorize what's in the book. And the next day the teacher says, okay, you, come here. Makes the students stand up in front of the class, and the teacher asks questions. And the student repeats from memory the things that they memorized about chemistry or biology or whatever. And I have watched maybe 100 teachers do this in the last 2 or 3 months. This is quite a standard way of teaching. And I have seen it done in English classes too. So what is the present perfect? The kid stands up and recites from memory the rules about the present perfect and sits down. Very good, now fill in the blanks. Okay? Now, if you're working with a group of teachers where most of them seem to be teaching in that way, I wonder how I'm supposed to design an online course for them, which will help them become more autonomous learners themselves, so that they can help their students to take more responsibility for their learning. It's a double whammy. Yeah? I wonder if the lessons I'm describing are similar to the lessons that you see when you watch teachers around you, or whether they're similar to the lessons that you had when you were growing up. Okay? I hardly ever see pair work or group work. If I see someone setting a context before teaching language in an English class, I'm so surprised I actually write to my friends and say, I saw a context today. Because normally I see, open the book, look at page 38. Now, this is where we left off. Read the instructions while I set up the IWV. Okay? And the student reads the instructions. Okay, do exercise 1. In fact, they don't even say that most of the time because they don't give the students a chance to do exercise 1 on their own first. Say, now we're going to do exercise 1. A, B, C, D. No thinking time, no wait time, no chance to check with a friend, no pair work or group work, all of that is skipped. But at the end of the lesson, all of the material has been filled in the book. So if mom and dad look in the English book, there was obviously a lesson, right? Because the answers are written in the book. All is well, right? So if you're working with a population where maybe 80-90% of the teachers are teaching like this, how would you go about creating an online course for people where you wanted them to be more autonomous and take some responsibility for their learning? Interesting question. If you get the answer, come and tell me. I'm still puzzling over this one, but that is actually one of the things that I have to deal with sometimes. Okay? Because all of the learners come with their own preconceptions about what teaching and learning is, about what a lesson should look like, about how they should be spending their time with you as a trainer or with their own students. Okay? We need to really understand their reality, I think, before we try to bring our own reality to them. Would it really be okay if I try to impose a system of collaborative, connectivist learning onto that group of people? I don't really think so. If you're humanistic, not really. Yeah? So I think sometimes we have a clash of values between the teacher and the students, or the trainer and the teachers, the, I don't know, of course, e-moderator and the participants, which is important. Okay? There are quite a lot of other tensions that we then end up with. So to what extent should my role as an online course writer be to deliver the content to them and let them do what they like with it? Or should I try to do something with deeper learning? Should I try to have projects and teamwork and make them create something? People are saying yes, or people are saying no, they're not sure. I don't know. What about, to what extent should I ask them to work individually, and to what extent should I ask a group of people like that to work socially and collaboratively? And to what extent should it be teacher-led, and to what extent should it be self-directed? Questions I wonder about. With the person sitting next to you, if you were in my shoes, okay, I've described a little bit about some of the context. Teachers are far away and I cannot normally see them. I can't work with them face to face. It will have to be completely online. What do you think the learners would appreciate? can you talk to the person next to you for a moment and let's see what you think. So are there any other dichotomies or tensions that come to mind at this point? These are the ones which interest me the most at the moment. These three. Yes, please.
What I think is that sometimes, as you say, the course is already written. In my case, I have designed the course and I deliver the course online, but I do not my students till they start.
Yeah.
So what I do is I try to model. I mean, the course, of course, is designed after my teacher release.
Yes. Yeah.
And I try to model what I expect from them, as I am sure, I mean, it's deeper learning, social self-directed on that side of the continuum. But if you don't know your learners, it's difficult to work this out.
Yes, it is. It's quite hard if you have not met them face to face, so you can't work with them in a blended way. Absolutely. I think it is important to try to get some kind of background out about this. I talk a little bit about teacher culture and teachers' backgrounds because I think it's extremely important that we understand it. And sometimes we meet a group of teachers and then we think, oh, they come from blah, blah, blah country. I know what that's like. But that's not always the case. Okay, I worked with a group of teachers from a country in Western Europe last year. They were primary school teachers. And I was working with them face to face. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have ever figured this out. But they told me after about 1.5 days, they said, Kristina, this is nice, but we can't do these activities with our students. I've heard that a zillion times, okay? Usually because there's no time. They have a packed program. That's the answer you're expecting, maybe. These teachers said to me, we can't ask our students to talk about their favorite object on their desk, or to talk about their families, or to talk about their pets in the English classroom. We can't ask them, we are not allowed to. We are not allowed to ask personal questions to the children. Which really surprised me, because to me, learning English or learning a foreign language is about learning to talk about the things that you're interested in. And if you're teaching small kids, the things that they're interested in is often their family, their room, their computer, their favorite sport, or whatever famous people, TV programs, that stuff. Those teachers in a Western European country were not allowed to ask those questions to the students in the classroom. Fascinating. I wonder how you teach English. I guess English becomes a school subject. Math, history, English. If you're not allowed to talk about yourself. I would love to have been able to go into a classroom and see, but it was unfortunately a holiday.
Did you know why they weren't allowed to ask those questions?
It was considered an invasion of privacy of the children, and it might embarrass somebody if we asked a question and they didn't want to talk about something personal, like their favorite, pet or something, animal. To me, that's a very different response. I've never had a problem dealing with kids in that way, but in this particular part of the world, that's a problem. It's a whole area, and the course books developed by the ministry actually reflected this view. Okay, so this is something which can come up everywhere, and I would not have expected that. All right, so we can go to different places and find really quite surprising things when we ask questions. Okay, one of the groups I work with a lot of different countries in my job, and one of the groups is actually Azerbaijan, so you'll see Azerbaijan mentioned. One of the things I do is I try to get everybody's emails and find out about them a little bit. So I do ask some questions. You don't have to worry about being able to read all of this. But I just try to find out what kind of things they would like to, they think they learn from in face-to-face workshops. Because I think it's nice to know how they would respond if I could actually be in the room with them, what they would want from me. Okay? And I thought it was kind of interesting, when we looked at the results afterwards, that many of them thought that watching a video of a teacher in a classroom was very high up on the list. They would like to see examples of other teachers teaching in different places. That I thought was great, because that transfers really nicely onto an online learning thing. So with a colleague in Poland, I hope we'll be here later on in the week, we were able to get some videos of classrooms where they're teaching science in English in Poland, and we're preparing them so we can use them online. So that was quite helpful. And then we asked directly, because these teachers have never had any kind of online learning before. The second question was more about online. which kind of activities would help you develop professionally. And learning English, okay, vocabulary exercises to learn English words, for example, was very high up. Okay? So it's an interesting set of combinations. I think it's really important to find out what they think professional development is. May or may not be my set of priorities, but hey, I'm working with them. They have to feel that it's worthwhile for them. So now we have some interesting things that we have to create for them, I think. Okay, so at least give them links to places where they can work on their vocabulary, give them places where they can access podcasts and other things, and then provide them some specially written materials as well, all within a course structure, okay, which is hopefully going to be nice and clear as we go along. So I think this tells us that we have to know about the environment. We also have to know about the other stakeholders. When I started working with online courses, I was very lucky that I was working with people who wanted to take the online course. They paid their money, they joined up because they were motivated. Yeah? But when you go into a classroom of students, or teachers who have come to a professional development session, did they all choose to be there? Not necessarily, okay? And that's also happening with online courses. Because if an organization decides that all the teachers are going to take some kind of certificate online, the teachers may not want to do this. Okay, so now you're facing the same issues of willingness and motivation, but it's one removed because you're not in the same room with them. And it can be quite hard to make contact with people or establish that relationship, yeah, from a distance. You also have the issue of the people who are kind of organizing it. You might have teachers who really want to do more communicative things in the classroom and who want to try out some modern new approaches or who want to experiment with technology. But if the principal of the school doesn't like this idea, if the principal of the school or the administration of the school are very behaviorist in their approach, they will, in some sense, block you from reaching that aim with the teacher. So it's quite important to be able to sell what you're trying to do to the other stakeholders. I didn't realize this when I first started working with online courses. I thought it was just me and the teachers, but it's not. There's a whole organization around, possibly the organization behind me and the organization behind the teachers, and we all have a different agenda sometimes. So you have to know a little bit about the business side and how to persuade people in this. Yeah? It's not just a matter of creating a course syllabus and putting it online. That would be a little bit easier, I guess. Along with all of this, I found that when I tried with one group of teachers that I could not talk to at all, to run an online course for them on storytelling. They were primary school teachers. I had a lot of ready-made, photocopy it and go to class kind of stuff, but lots of resources to make their lessons more lively, and I wanted them to experiment and try things. That was very interesting, because some people never did anything at all. They seemed to go into the Moodle site, but not actually access any of the materials, and leave half an hour later without having done anything. So eventually I managed to find some phone numbers and find the teachers and what's going on. They said things like, we can't find it. I go there and I don't know what to do. So I send a video. I get the answer back, couldn't watch the video. Why not? No answer. No clear answer. What page were you on when you got stuck? Or what kind of error message is coming up when you can't see the video? What kind of a computer are you using, or where are you? Is the school blocking it? I couldn't get any kind of answer because the teacher at the other end doesn't know how to explain any of this. I found some teachers I'm working with do not know how to copy-paste a URL. They type it. So you can imagine if it's a long URL, I click on it and I don't get to the page because they've made a typing error. Okay? Has anyone else ever had that? You actually have to, I realize I have to assume that there will be one person who does not know how to copy-paste a URL in the group. Okay? And also they don't know how to take a screenshot, a lot of people. Either print screen or any other way. So when you ask them to send a picture of the page, they don't know how to do that. So I ended up going back to the beginning and creating tutorials, PDF and video, to make sure that people could access this one way or the other for how to do these things. Because if they can't tell me what the problem is, I can't help them from long distance. Yeah? So one of the things that we offer to teachers is just a set of 6 do-it-yourself lessons, self-study. Okay? They come in one at a time with screenshots and arrows and instructions, and we're looking at things like how to use Google Calendar, for example. Many teachers have no idea that there is a calendar on Google, and they could, if they have a Gmail account, they could actually save things, they could share a calendar. This is new for a lot of teachers that I work with. Bookmarking on Digo, for example, or on some other online site is something very new for many people that I work with. We may all know about these things, but there are millions and millions of people who don't. Okay, so we shouldn't assume that there are all these digital natives out there and everybody knows how to do this stuff. And if I assume that they know it and they don't, then we have a kind of double whammy because they feel awkward asking what I mean. It's hard enough for someone here maybe to raise their hand and say, what are you talking about? What's social bookmarking? Okay, but if you're online with somebody, there's, I think, even more resistance at times to doing that. So I am assuming that people know nothing. Okay, and sending through tutorials with information. People who know the stuff will be able to do it quickly. People who don't will go through it more slowly. So I start off by trying to attract their attention. You know, did you know that you can save your bookmarks online? There's also lots of English in here. I'm going to design some English quizzes about the language that's being used in these tutorial sheets. Did you know you can add a sticky note to a web page? I think that's revolutionary. I can write on the internet. Wow! And I can come back from another computer and look at it. Brilliant! Yeah, I'll never forget the excitement I felt when I realized that I could highlight web pages and come back to that web page again later on and see my highlighting. I think that's fantastic. Yeah? So trying to get some sort of enthusiasm up with the teachers. And it's, really practical screenshots with stuff. I'm trying to embed a little bit in there about being safe online, because I meet a lot of teachers. They put in their email address in the first box. Now what do they put in the second one? This is to sign into Digo, or to sign into an account on the web. Which password? Email password, yes. I mean, 70-80% of teachers in a room can do this. I know, I have watched. Okay, so I have to assume that the teacher does not know that they have to create a separate password for this, and that you're not supposed to put your email password in the box. Okay? So really, I think we have to really, really look at our audience and our participants in an online course carefully, and try to catch these problems. Yeah, before they run into difficulties. Because the teacher who makes a mistake here and doesn't log out of the computer when they leave wherever they're leaving, I don't know, leaves their email on. I know people who do that, loads of people who do that when they walk away from a computer in a school somewhere. These people end up getting spammed, or their accounts get hacked, and then they have a very negative experience of online learning, and they'll never come back. Okay, so safety nets underneath everybody, I think, is helpful. I'm backing it up with videos. I use Screener, as you can put 5-minute little desktop videos on the web for free. So I put on the headphones with the mic, and I record my desktop and I explain. Yeah, one very useful technique is to be able to take a picture of what your computer desktop looks like. So if you run into a technical problem, I can help you. Meanwhile, I'm showing them how to do this and recording it, and then I can put the link in the materials. Does anyone use a different platform for creating these kind of tutorials? Yeah, one or the other. Okay. I think it's really important to think through these kind of tutorials and get them ready for people. Because it's very normal. I mean, I had to learn this stuff. It wasn't such a long time ago. I didn't grow up with computers. So I had to go through the learning process. I would like to make it as painless as possible for the others. So I think it's really important, as a third tip, that we help people with technical things. I think we should remember that when we make decisions about the course design, these are not pedagogically neutral. Okay? I can't help but bring my enthusiasm for being more autonomous and taking responsibility and collaborating and working together in groups on projects, I can't help but bring that with me when I start to design materials. And if I send people only, for example, PDFs and videos, I'm sending them the message that learning is something completely individual and we don't have a social element at all. Yeah? So we need to think very carefully about the balance of materials that we put on the web for learners and what we send them. Yeah? Maybe it's helpful to think about this as something with stages. Okay? We could think of different stages. Oops, what's happened to my picture? My picture has vanished. I'm terribly sorry. That was there earlier. I don't know where it is. We can think of the learners, I'll put this on later for you. We can think of the learners as starting off needing a lot of support and gradually needing a bit less and a bit less and a bit less. I don't have it. Where? It's not there. No, it's not there. You have it, but I don't have it, and I don't know why. It's very strange. Okay. You should be reading the slide up then. Learners needing a lot of support at the beginning, and gradually we give them a lot of support, and gradually we begin to reduce the amount of support, and the learners need less and less as they become more sort of self-regulating as we go along. Okay? So we could think of ourselves as guiding students to a place where they will be more autonomous. Okay? So we're not really neutral in this as a course designer. I have a hidden agenda, which is not hidden if I think back to my first tip, which was to make your learning, teaching views very, very explicit. Okay? I think it's best to tell them directly, you might want this, but I want you to learn that. Put your cards on the table, okay? Because they're there. And otherwise, I think it's a little bit manipulative. I might say, oh yes, of course, you're fine just the way you are. If you want to have lots of PDFs, that's terrific. Let's discuss that on the Google group. Okay? Manipulative. Rather not be that way. We have lots and lots of different learners in the groups. And if you work with teachers in different contexts, in different schools, they have different ages, different backgrounds. If you work with 150 teachers on a course, one size is not going to fit all. You're going to need to have different kinds of activities and approaches for different people with different backgrounds. Some of the people doing the course that I'm running at the moment are actually computer teachers. Okay, and they perceive the course in a completely different way. They don't teach these kind of collaborative skills to the students. They teach people how to manage the desktop and save files and create folders and things. So they view what I'm doing in a completely different way than, say, an English language teacher is viewing the materials. They're all taking the same course. So we can look at a variety of different kinds of activity types, which hopefully meet the needs of different kinds of learners in the group, but also allow me to reach my objectives. So, for example, dialectic questioning, question, answer, and discussion. Yeah? Giving them activities where they can synthesize and evaluate what they've been studying or learning, or the materials. Collaboration, and giving them a chance to generate some of the content on the course, which will appeal to some people but not to others. Chances to reflect on what they're learning. We can create our own content, and we can get them to create content. And there are many different ways to put the content out in front of someone who's on the online course. And we can also deal with the social and the emotional side. Okay? Some people I've worked with love the idea of having a Facebook group. They even do it for themselves. At other contexts I work in, Facebook is an absolute no-no. There's absolutely no way that any of the teachers will get involved on Facebook. So if I even suggested it, will be a problem. Okay, so again, it comes back to knowing your learners very, very well. And I think here are just some of the options that you've got. Okay, you've got forum discussions and discussion groups, presentations and portfolios where the learners can put together what they've been learning and present it. We have a whole variety of different tools for collaborative work and many subcategories of that. We had an example earlier about students creating the vocabulary lists on a mind map for English language learners. We can ask them to reflect, and that could be private or public. We had discussion earlier about whether students would want to reflect in a public place or whether they would prefer to write directly to a teacher or a trainer. And in terms of content, we have many things. We have just audio, which can be very stimulating sometimes. very low tech and very easy to send. Okay? Or we can have more interactive gaming type elements, which might be complicated if people don't have the internet access or they can't get online regularly. Sometimes sending a set of podcasts with nice tasks, podcasts can be very interesting, can be motivating for the learners. And then the social element. To what extent do we want them to be on a social network? Edmodo is fairly private for that. We've already heard about that. Or whether you want to do some kind of webinars. Webinars can be great fun if you pass the presenter mode to the people who are participating. Okay, so they can join in with or without a camera, depending on whether they want you to be able to see them. But you can hear each other's voices. And just being able to hear the voice of the other people who are there creates a really nice social atmosphere. So these are some of the things I think we should be considering blending to appeal to different kinds of learners and people with different backgrounds. Mm-hmm. Would you add any other categories to that list? Not just at the moment, perhaps. Okay. So basically, the next tip is to balance activity types. Okay? And to balance the preset things that you've done yourself with the things that the learners are going to give you. Getting the balance right for that group. I think we shouldn't forget about assessment. Is the course assessed? Are there assignments? I'm not going to read 150 assignments. Terribly sorry. Can't do that. Not possible. Are they forced to do this course by the administration? And will the administration want to see some kind of evidence of learning? Or evidence of having done something? Evidence of learning and doing is not always the same thing. Not clear. So you want to think about to what extent you would use assessment to motivate people. They can work in lots of different media if they're open to it and if they're willing to experiment with creating stuff, okay, creating their own video and audio materials, voice threads, for example, lots of different possibilities. They can produce their own e-portfolio. But it can be very hard to give those skills and that confidence to people who are far away if they're at the sort of digital level of not being able to take a screenshot. Okay? So we have to get the level right when we do this. I think we're looking at a whole bunch of different generations of e-learning, and the people in this room, we know a lot about it, but it doesn't mean that the people we're working with in some places have any background at all, and they need time to learn how it works. Yeah? Or maybe the first generation is that you have your single author course. I write a course, I put it online, and it's basically a copy of what I teach in my face-to-face classroom. This is the online. First generation, straightforward. You could have a more a system of reusable learning objects, which was mentioned earlier. You could have pieces of the puzzle which can be reorganized according to the context. It's very often written by a group of people then. You need a team of people to do this. But still probably centered on the idea of a traditional course. The course starts on the 15th and finishes 1 month later. Okay? The next generation might not be really a course anymore. It might not be time constrained. You might have the material online. Go and take part if you want to. If this interests you, help yourself. Huh? And then we're talking more about just-in-time learning. You need something at that moment, and you go and you find the answer to what you need then. Maybe more personalized. Maybe this person who is using the course is the person who discovers their own path through the material. Yeah, that's another way of looking at the online or blended courses. And maybe next, I don't know. Now I'm beginning to think that we're going to live like bees. Yeah, bzzz, a hive. Maybe we have collective needs as a group, and the structure emerges. Okay? Not so much from what the teacher puts down, but emerges from the needs of the participants in the group. I think each one of these levels requires a different level of sophistication of the user and a different awareness of what it is like to be online. Are you going online just to pull the weather forecast once in a while, or just to deal with the emails, which is what my mother does once a week? I get an email because she goes online and does email. Okay, but she doesn't live online, and she would never look at Facebook, as we had the example this morning. Absolutely never in a million years. Okay, so some people are very comfortable with that online persona, and some people are not. If you're really comfortable online, then this third, fourth generation stuff is great. But if you're still at the level where you're not really sure about this online thing, and you have one email, and you're not interested in social media, and you don't follow a blog, never taken a course before, okay, you don't use computers very much in your day-to-day life, then you're probably more comfortable with one of the first or second generation courses. Make sense? Okay. So I do think we have to involve the learners a lot in this process. I think we have to identify their needs. We have to think about who they are, okay? Really who they are. You're not just a group, they're a group of teachers somewhere in Western Europe, but really who they are, okay? And where are they in terms of their learning about their subject area as well as the online aspect and their use of computers. And we need to help them identify their needs. Doing it together, I think, is best. We need to try to set some goals. I would prefer to do that together. This is not a neutral thing that I'm saying. I want them to be involved because I would like to model the process so that hopefully they go away and they model this with their own learners. And then we need to sit down and plan some of the learning, how we will do this and what tools and how much time. And this is a light year away for the teacher whose idea of teaching is that he will set 3 pages of the chemistry course book to be memorized, isn't it? We need to find systems for monitoring what they're doing. And we need to think about assessment and how we would revise that course later on if we do it again. If you put in that much work into a course, you really want to be able to use the materials again. You don't want it to be a one-off because it's too much work and too many people are involved in the process. Yeah? And we want to be able to think about to what extent we are covering all these different areas of learner autonomy. Are we helping people to manage their learning, okay? To pull all these different features together, to plan and evaluate. Something to think about. After that, I think putting in the tools is relatively easy. Where we want a bit of video and where we want a bit of a wiki is much simpler after we have the bigger picture, I would argue. And that's really what I wanted to say today about learner autonomy and blended learning. Yeah? In some ways, I don't think it's not different from wanting to do this in a face-to-face class. But what we need to consider is the differences in terms of distance, okay, and space. We're not in the same area. And time, we are not working in the same time frame, possibly, if you do asynchronous work. And it can be hard to develop that relationship and that communication with the students if they're not used to writing emails, for example. The example of not putting the subject in the email, I get the reverse. I get the entire email written in the subject bar. Okay? Very, very long. I have to copy-paste it and put it into the box to be able to read it. Okay? So communication is a major issue with all of these things. And then we have a lot of challenges when we design courses in this way. So that's all for me. And online you'll be able to see all of the resources later on. Okay, I work at CELT Academy, and I work with teachers all over the place, Western Europe and the Stans, a lot of the eastern parts, and I have worked also in North Africa and Middle East. So now it's time for your questions. No, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. No questions. You're either completely exhausted, or I've wiped you out. Yes?
Okay, question from the audience. What is dialectic questioning?
Mm-hmm.
And if I could just pose the next one, is that
Sure.
The fixed mindset versus growth mindset, which one do you think principals have? Which one do teachers have? And how can it affect blended learning experience?
Okay, so the dialectic
That was
learning,
from Rachel.
I'm talking more about asking and answering questions. If someone wants to have a class with you, the teacher might start asking questions. Tell me about this. Why is this the case? Give me evidence for that. By asking good questions and making you think, in theory, you are learning. So it's a very traditional way of managing a classroom. It goes all the way back to ancient Greece. Dialectical learning. No, that's what I understand it here. Another one was about growth. Can you read growth mindset or
Fixed mindset versus growth
growth?
mindset.
Okay.
Which one,
Mhm.
principal, teacher, and how does it affect?
I haven't used the term fixed mindset and growth mindset exactly myself, so I hope I'm answering the question correctly, or the way the person who posed it wanted it answered. I think that a lot of principals, because we're all dealing with different stakeholders, yeah? If I'm a primary school teacher, I have to deal with the learners, but I also have to think about mom and dad at home, because they're very present. They're very present if you're a primary school teacher. If you're a university teacher, the young people you're working with, their mom and dad are a little bit more distant. They're not maybe as involved in education as a primary school child's parents will be. I think that the director of the school has to deal with a whole bunch of different stakeholders. They have to deal with the parents, they have to deal with financial issues, they have to deal with the image of the school and how it's positioned against other schools. So I think that their mindset is going to be different. And many of these principals, if they were teachers 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Okay, and they may not be reading any of the materials coming out these days about learning or educational uses of technology. Yeah, so if you talk about collaborative learning, they have maybe never heard the term before, potentially, depending on where you are in the world. So I think it's quite natural that there's a big gap between what the principals think about education and what some of the teachers think about education, and that can cause a clash. So just the other week, a friend of mine was telling me that she wanted her primary school students to bake a cake. It's very hard to motivate her students to speak English, but she worked really hard, and they all brought recipes, and they brought the stuff, and she got everything ready, and she was going down the steps to the kitchen in the school so they could bake their cake in English. And the vice principal caught them. And the vice principal said, "What? What are you talking about? You have a book. You have an exercise book. You have a board. Go back to class." End of cake. And I've had 3 experiences in the last year where I've been told the cake story by teachers I work with. And on 2 occasions, the principal had a very negative idea about children baking a cake. "How can you learn English by doing something like that?" was the expression that the teacher was told. In one case, the principal was extremely happy and actually praised the teacher. Okay, and of course the teacher who was criticized cannot really do anything in that case. I would love to do something for that teacher, but I can't. What can I do? So I think principals sometimes have very forward-thinking points of view about education, but sometimes they don't. But we don't work with the principals. I bet we wish we could. Yeah. Other questions? Yes, please.
You thought that it's very important to balance the activities in the classroom according to students' needs, multiple intelligence. I think that it's very crucial when you're assessing the students also. So you should organize the activities, assessment activities.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because I'm working gifted and talented center in Turkey. Because the students have multiple intelligence.
Yes.
Some of them visualize, some of them kinesthetic, and some of them interpersonal intelligence.
Right.
So while you are assessing, it's very important to think that issue, I think.
That's a really good point. Thank you. Yes, I agree. I think that's the advantage of having a portfolio, is you could give the students lots of choices about what they're going to do. One thing I have done with students is given them a grid, okay, with 3 columns and 3 different kinds of tasks. One is more to do with speaking, one is more visual, and one is more writing. And there are different levels of difficulty as well. So the students have to decide each time they're going to be assessed which one they're going to choose to be assessed on. They pick one, but they can't pick the same category each time, and they're not allowed to stay with the same level of difficulty throughout the course. So if someone chooses the easiest audio activity the first time, next time they cannot choose the same one. And if they choose audio later on, when they've tried some other things, they can't choose the easiest one, they have to choose the medium level of difficulty. So I kind of give them some choices, but within a range. So they're still doing what I want, kind of. Again, it's not pedagogically neutral, is it? But they've still got some choices to do that. So thank you. That's a good point. Other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for being such a very nice and attentive audience. Thank you.